sexual harassment at workplace. The Act came on 9th December 2013 for protecting women employees in their workplace. Come March 2015, a lot of organizations are thinking, what is the right thing to do, and are we in line with the Act? The message to Indian companies is unambiguous. Comply with the country's new sexual harassment law or be ready to face the music. Any organization that does not comply with statutory requirement will face serious legal actions. A lot of organizations are thinking what and how. In our earlier webinar, we tried to explain what is sexual harassment, what are the different kinds of sexual harassment, responsibilities of the various stakeholders, including employers, supervisors, and employees, preventive actions that organizations need to take, both reputation and legal compliance. Today's webinar focuses on reading of the Act that gives the clear, strong message we opened this webinar with. We are going to delve in the detail. The question, this is on many organizations' mind, and it could be on yours too. Do we really need to take note of this Act? The answer is very loud and clear, yes. You could, as some others, have a policy under the relevant provisions of Vishaka guidelines. You're sincere in your endeavor to curb instances of sexual harassment at your workplace. But do you know how you need to revisit your internal policies to align them with the Sexual Harassment at Workplace Prevention, Prohibition and Redressal Act 2013? And how to protect your workforce and organization? These are the points we will discuss in a lively and interactive manner with an expert in this area. So, welcoming Dr. Uttara. She's a lady who introduced me to this space of law and policy on anti-sexual harassment. She holds a medical degree in preventive and community health and practices. She has practiced in UK and India for good 15 years. She's a qualified counselor, trainer, and founder, trustee, and director of Viveka, Center for Emotional Support, a not-for-profit organization providing free and confidential counseling for these persons with emotional distress in Bangalore. Heads various committees across various industries, for example, CG, Emphasis, Cisco, Azim Premji Foundation, NDTV, etc. Doctor, I hope I've done justice to your introduction, and please feel free to add about the same and some opening remarks about the webinar.
Thank you so much, Smita, and I'm really happy to be part of this awareness that you have organized. To begin with, I agree that we often start providing support to employees based on a legal requirement, but I think most organizations now know that they have to go way beyond that, particularly to create a harmonious and a safe working environment. And that leads to a number of benefits that may be not immediately tangible, but are clearly evident if you look at some of the data that's available. So that is when employees feel safe and are able to do what they were hired to do. It affects and positively not just the work culture, but also prevents attrition. It helps people to be able to work in diverse environments. And therefore, organizations then are so much more happy to have people in that environment. So I think that's one aspect of looking at sexual harassment. And therefore, it's not just about responding to a case as it comes up, but also to create an environment, which means that the culture of the organization has to be such that everyone is happy working there. In other words, prevention becomes a very large part of what we should be doing. So let's go ahead and hope we have a meaningful session.
Lovely, Doctor. And thank you for starting that. And letting us know that prevention is the most important aspect, and that is what we're looking at creating this whole with the help of this act, of course. So audience, we are going to do this very interestingly and very differently. What we have done here is we have got a hero of this webinar called Ashok Chandra. He's of course an imaginary character. What we have given him is a role of a CEO. He's a CEO of 5,000 strong organization. He's a very progressive leader who totally believes in running an ethical organization with a strongly uncompromising code of behavior regarding safety and anti-harassment, including sexual harassment. He's proud of internal systems and policies he has in place and believes that are well in line with Vishaka guidelines. He and his CHRO they work closely to nurture this culture. In many ways, each one of you symbolize Ashok Chandra. You are ethical, you care, and you believe in the principles of anti-sexual harassment. Through the eyes of Ashok and yours, we will address some interesting questions covering employer accountability, prevention, and redressal, as well as governance. Under the expert guidance of my favorite Dr. Uttara, we'll see how there can be gaps between intent and impact and how you can plug them. Are we ready, Doctor?
Absolutely. Let's go.
Super. So, Dr. Ashok believes he already has a committee with committed senior members. So, is that good enough?
I think that's extremely important. I think when an organization is committed at its top management to have a zero tolerance to harassment of any kind and works really in a committed fashion for zero occurrence, I think that's more than half the battle won. Other things would follow automatically. There is a law in place. There are processes and procedures that all of us can put in place and work towards educating and making all employees aware of their rights. All that follows pretty much based on the original and most important commitment to providing this safe environment.
Lovely.
So,
yes. You were saying something, Doctor?
No, I was just going to pick up one point. That was that while we were working under the Vishaka guidelines up to December of 2013, we now have to revise our internal policies to come in line with the law, which has certain changes and differences from the Vishaka guidelines. So maybe a little bit of understanding of that needs to be in place. That while the guidelines were operational for many years, it is now the law that is in place, and which is what needs the changes in the internal policies for organizations which were compliant with Vishaka earlier.
Okay. It's a great point you have got, Doctor, because there is a disconnect, as in people very loosely use that we are compliant with Vishaka guidelines, but now they should be aware that Law 2013 is something which is over and above Vishaka guidelines, so that is a change. So we should be looking at that. Now, leading from that earlier point that you made about 2013 guidelines, in that it says that Ashok is concerned, now this is about him, that he has offices in multiple states. So does he have to set ICC at each and every office? Can the presiding officer be same across all offices?
Yes, I think in this context we must understand the spirit of the law. The spirit of the law is directed towards providing a decentralized response mechanism. That is, they feel that people who are working in a particular location would like to see their grievances or their problems addressed locally and not feel that there is somebody thousands of kilometers away who's going to address their issues. So it makes sense, and not just, as I said, to be legally compliant, to have complaints committees which are present in offices where geographically present in offices where the company has offices. saying this, of course, it does raise certain very uh, clear difficulties sometimes. One is that one may not have senior women employees because the majority of the committee has to consist of women, as well as it has to have a presiding officer who's a senior woman employee. And this does sometimes raise difficulties for organizations which do not employ that many women, nor do they have senior women in place to man this ICC committees or to woman these ICC committees. So it is possible to have a presiding officer who heads more than one ICC committee, and that is perfectly acceptable by law as well as by for logistics. But the idea is that to provide redressal as close to the employee as possible.
Got it. Right. So, Doctor, picking up from the spirit of law, the Act very clearly says that this is specifically for women employees. Now, Ashok is concerned that he has a gender-neutral policy. So, does that mean that now he has to redraft a new policy which has to be specifically for women employees?
No, not at all. I think the organization has the right and want and can implement a gender neutral policy and a sexuality neutral policy. This is a company assurance to all employees.
Yes.
The only difference, therefore, would be in regard to the law that men cannot access their cannot demand these rights outside the company. It's only the company that's assuring them a level with all other. I mean, with everybody. So, which means that it's clear that irrespective of gender, the company assures the same response. However, outside, that is in a court of law, a man cannot raise a complaint of sexual harassment under this law.
Yeah.
They do not have that because the law is specifically for women employees and to prevent sexual harassment of women in the workplace. So companies certainly can have a policy which is gender neutral as well as sexuality neutral. And I want to say that there is clearly, in my experience over the last more than a decade in this area, we are beginning to see same-sex harassment complaints as well. So men are raising complaints against men and women are raising complaints against women. So it is important that we understand this aspect of sexual harassment as well.
Yes. All right. Lovely. I think you have answered. A lot of people are worried, especially people, organizations which are inspired by MNCs who have gender neutral policies. They were worried that with this new law, do we have to change this? And Ashok is typically one of them. Yeah, so I think you've answered that question very well. Now, Doctor, in your earlier answer, you were speaking about company or an organization. So, Ashok as CEO, what is the organization? Is he as a CEO, is board of directors? What do you mean by a company or an organization?
I think both the CEO and the board of directors have fiduciary responsibilities for the organization. They both represent the organization, and the CEO is perhaps the first person who comes to mind when we talk about an organization. But both the board of directors as well as the CEO have fiduciary responsibilities and are therefore represent the organization in all of the aspects that it works in, as well as liability and loyalty, duty, care, all of these things come into their fiduciary responsibilities.
All right. Doctor, moving to a fifth question that he has. He is, as I said, that he's inspired by MNC culture. He already has a simple process which is quite effective. He has a whistleblowing hotline, and can that hotline be extended to for ICC raising their questions, concerns? Can they use the same whistleblowing hotline, or do we have to set it up? I mean, Ashok has to set it up differently.
I think it's clear that the sexual harassment law says that there must be clear processes specifically set up for receiving and addressing complaints from employees in the organization. And in this context, that is to have this whole separate process or a separate route that sexual harassment takes in an organization or in a company or in any institution is very uniquely Indian, because we are one of the perhaps the only country in the world which has addressed sexual harassment of women in the workplace as something unique and distinct. So while all other aspects of harassment are covered by other policies within the organization, sexual harassment has a unique space. It doesn't mean that somebody cannot raise a complaint to the whistleblower or to other methodologies that an organization has to raise concerns that employees have, whether it is a discrimination or it is workplace harassment or it is discrimination based on race, gender, religion, whatever may be the other forms of discrimination that the company provides protection. There has to be a specific process which has to be put in place under the new law for sexual harassment. But complaints may come in from many methodologies that the organization has. It could be, as you said, a whistleblower or an ombuds person, whatever they may have. But this sexual harassment complaint mechanism does have to be used.
Okay. Okay.
Hi, I just have a small suggestion, Dr. Uttara, if you could just move back a little bit.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that will actually help us see you better. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
What can, so moving to the next question, Doctor. He has set up this whole hotline bit and everything is working well. Now the next question arises is that after setting it up all this, after providing enough awareness, the next issue is that to encourage employees to report the incident. It becomes extremely difficult to encourage them to do it. What happens if the aggrieved employee does not report the incident?
I think it's really important for organizations to take the trouble to convince employees and create trust in the credibility of this process. And therefore, they have to commit to certain very basic fundamentals that employees would be worried about. So one of the most important ones would be confidentiality. The second perhaps would be a fear of retaliation. And companies must specifically ensure and reassure employees that neither the organization nor any of its members will retaliate against an employee for taking up or putting out a complaint, that is raising a complaint or participating in an investigation. So it's a matter of really taking the trouble to build trust, and we all know that trust isn't built in a day. So the processes have to be credible. The ICC must be manned by people who have a good, credible position in the organization. The messages of, as I said, confidentiality, retaliation, objectivity, neutrality, that is, that everybody's case is treated as urgent and important and is blind to levels in the organization. All of these have to be specifically worked on and assured. And I repeat again what I said right in the beginning, that the commitment of the senior management then becomes even more critical. Because it's with that assurance that people will feel comfortable to raise complaints, that they will be taken seriously and they will be dealt with sensitively. So I think It's a journey actually. It can't happen immediately, but I think the fact that Ashok is thinking about it, that he's worried if people don't complain, I think is a fantastic first step.
Yeah. Lovely. So, good, interesting point that you've got, that it is his responsibility. Now, after that, after listening to you, he's obviously thinking about some complaints which would, I mean, some act which would have happened before 9th December 2013, and after making so much of, popularizing the whole law and act within the organization, one of the employee has got an issue which is dated. Okay, it was before 9th December 2013. So what happens in that case? Do we refer to the old guidelines or do we refer to the new act?
As the complaint has been raised after the act has been passed and the new policy of the organization has been put in place, the new rules and the new processes, procedures apply, irrespective of when the actual harassment took place. Harassment may have taken place earlier, but once the law is in place and the company has aligned itself to the new law and has put in place the new requirements, that rule is what will apply. So that's not not difficult for organizations to do. I think once they have the a new law in place and a new policy in place, they should just respond with that.
Okay. All right, lovely. Doctor, another problem that Ashok has, he has organizations, employees visiting overseas location. So will the act, which is an Indian act, be applicable to his overseas location, is his question.
The real point is that when people travel and work overseas, the law of the land precedes everything else. So the rules or the laws, so all organizations have to be compliant legally in the geographies that they are operating in. But the Indian law, which also is a pretty well written law in terms of protection, is good if you see what I mean. It's not something that's lacking. So an organization can say this is the law that we have and these are the procedures that we follow, and an individual within the organization can access the administrative or the intra-company processes, and they can be satisfied if they feel that there was a just process with the outcomes that the company decides on. However, if they are not satisfied and they want to access the law of the country in which they are working, that actually then will come into place.
All right. Okay.
So the organization must have the process so that people can access it. And if they feel that they would like to do more or they're not satisfied, they have recourse to the laws, because sexual harassment is against the law in almost all over the world. Not just in
Got it. Now, the woman-only aspect is bothering Ashok. He believes that I mean, all employees should be treated equally. So his ninth question is, if a grieved employee is a man, can he appeal under this act? Can all the provisions of the act be still invoked, both from legal and moral standpoint?
No, we come back to the same thing, that the men in the organization are protected by their policy, which could be exactly the same as has been set out by law for women. So the company can offer the same protection to men within the company. It's outside the company, in the legal framework of the country, that in India this law does not apply.
Right.
But they can't go to the police station and say, I was sexually harassed, so under this law, which we just talked about, I want to raise a complaint. So that will not apply to them. They will have to raise complaints based on other sections of the IPC, not under this protection of and prevention and redressal, because this is particularly for women within the workplace. So
Yeah,
That's
that
the only point that is different. But within the organization, of course, men can, because the company is assuring it. A company is giving the men that right and providing the same guidelines or same protective measures that they are providing for women. They've
right,
chosen to do that, and they can do that.
right, right. Okay, lovely. Now, Ashok says he doesn't like lengthy and redundant record keeping. So, what are the documentation of this act? Do I have to record and document all cases, and do I have to report anything to government?
Yes, it is extremely important to maintain documents, and they have to be maintained for 7 years because, as we just said earlier, that this is actionable in a court of law. So, if somebody, even if somebody comes and raises a complaint within the organization, and the organization goes through its own process and decides on some action, the person has, the woman particularly, has the right to take it outside. She can go after raising a complaint within the organization. She can also raise a complaint outside and access the legal system. In which case, the law may ask for our investigation and say what was the investigation that was conducted within the organization, and they can ask for, if they want to, for our records. The second
Right,
most important is that within the law itself, these internal complaints committees have been given the powers of a magistrate, of a first-class magistrate. So they have to conduct their proceedings in a manner in which it follows a judicial process, a quasi-judicial process. So record keeping is extremely important, and retaining the records and preserving them is extremely important too, because I'm sure many organizations are covered by Sarbanes-Oxley, which is which is no destruction of any evidence, right? So we need to be clear that records are maintained of the investigation of any evidence that is collected in case it is taken up outside a court, in a court. So it is really important that this is done in a manner which would satisfy anybody that this was a very fair and just inquiry and outcome.
absolutely, Dr. Bang on. So there is
Yeah.
so much to know about this act and this policy. It's pretty new, and a lot of people are still trying to understand because that is that much that is written in those few pages of the act. So
Yeah.
maybe it's best to consult a consultant. Okay. Plus, Dr. Uttara, she has been so kind to answer so many of Ashok's question. I think, Doctor, we have few questions from the audiences. If you don't mind, we'll quickly go through them. One
Okay.
of the audience is he's from Mumbai. He says that should the third party be only an NGO person, or we can have somebody else? So what I mean, I can have somebody else. So what is this about NGO person? He
I think,
wanted to understand the spirit of law.
yeah, again, it is to have somebody on this, the external person, to be someone who's aware of the issues around sexual harassment. They have picked an NGO because for the longest time, women have worked for women's rights in that space. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean that they have to be. It's one of the places where you can look for a resource who has some experience of uh, harassment as well as women and how they experience these things. But it isn't that the person has to be. I think the bottom line really is someone who's aware and is well versed and has experience in working in this area and can provide the kind of support that the external member is expected to bring to the committee.
Yeah.
Because I think one of the things that I've learned is that very often the external members are underutilized. They are not, you know, their resources or their strengths are not always taken, and they're only called when there's a case and some action has to be decided. But I think external people can provide much more than that in terms of an organization's culture and the way it responds to sexual harassment.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Ajay, for asking that question. I think it's a very important thing, and thank you, Doctor, for responding. I have one more question now. This is from Bangalore. Ramesh has sent this. He's saying, should the ICC be constituted for every office premises? I have 2 or 3 guys in some of my remote office locations. How will I constitute an ICC in there? I think, Doctor, you tried to answer that question earlier also.
Yes, of course, you're supposed to have an ICC if you have 10 employees, but I think that is a little bit impractical. However, when we say office, we are really looking at organizations which have large numbers of employees, sometimes in 2 or 3 locations within the same city. I think it's important to have ICC at least one in every location, meaning whether it's a city or it's a smaller town, and that would really help. Sometimes you may have 2 or 3 in a single state because you have 2 or 3 large offices in multiple locations within the same state. But the idea really is to get an ICC in place where you have sufficient number of employees who would say, I'd like my grievance or my difficulty to be addressed by people who know what's happening in my location. Not somebody you have, you're sitting in, say, Mumbai as head office, or Bangalore as head office, or Delhi as head office, and somebody raises a complaint in Coimbatore or in Mangalore, and they are thinking, these people who are sitting so far away from where I am understand what's happening. So
Yeah.
it's really to help people feel comfortable to raise complaints, to feel that they are being heard in a manner in which they would be understood, and also, of course, to hasten the process because it always takes much longer if you're that far away from where things are happening to respond. So to respond in and to bring cases or complaints to closure quicker is important to do. That you have ICCs who will be able to do this.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So I hope Ramesh gets his answer. Uh, uh, Audiences, if you have any questions, please register on info@kelphr.com. We will take it forward and request Dr. Uttara to respond to it. Doctor, I think a couple of more questions are coming in. Can I ask you some more from the audience?
Please go ahead. Please go ahead. Yeah.
So another lady is asking me that that can we have awareness programs only from female employees? I don't see a need to let men make. I mean, conduct. I mean, I don't need to see a men conduct. Go through the awareness program is what I think she's meaning to ask.
I think that would be a bit short-sighted in the sense of it's complaints by and large 98, 99% of cases are women raising complaints against men. So we really need to educate and make everybody aware of what is appropriate behavior in the workplace. So women need to feel, okay, men know, they understand, they are being alerted to what is appropriate and what could be something that will be seen as inappropriate in the workplace. So men need to know and men need to understand the sensitivities around sexual harassment. They don't have to maybe be in the same room where women are uncomfortable, but they need to be made aware of their rights. Very often I'm told by people, women have to be taught how to say no. You know, they don't like something, they should be able to say, "Look, I don't like this. Can you stop?" And women sometimes, feel a bit embarrassed, or sometimes they're not empowered to say this. But I also say that while we encourage women to become assertive, we also have to help men to hear the no.
Yeah,
It's not just
absolutely.
that women have to say it, but men have to hear it. And unless men are taught and are made aware and are sensitized to how they may be seen, or how their behavior may be interpreted, it becomes difficult. So both men and women need to know what is okay, what is not okay, what is acceptable, what is unacceptable in the workplace.
Absolutely. So this was Charu from Pune who was asking. I hope, Charu, you have got your response. The next question is from Aaron. He's from a car company. He's asking that I do not have any senior lady representative
Yeah,
to head the ICC. So what will I do?
that's a tough one. Only because this is the story of many uh, organizations, particularly manufacturing, I think, hasn't had many women reach higher levels in management. However, there are two suggestions I would make. One is that maybe you can take your external person, that is the external member who can be a senior, experienced person. But you still need to have a presiding officer from the organization, and that would be your senior most woman. That's about it that I can say. But it would help if you can take the external person with more experience and with the ability to manage the committee in a manner in which they understand the nuances of sexual harassment.
Yeah, great.
And of
I
course,
think
you can always have, if you have one senior person, she can be the presiding officer for many committees. It
great.
doesn't mean that it has to be necessarily a separate presiding officer. It would be ideal, but if you have one or two senior women, they can be the presiding officers for two or three committees. That's okay. It would work quite well.
Yeah, yeah. So, great, Doctor. I think these were the questions, and I think people are trying to put in more. We'll take it separately.
Yeah.
So, I would want to let the audiences know that if you are unable to place your questions in today's session, please send them to info@kelphr with your contact number, and a Kelp consultant will reach out to you to address them. Doctor, thank you very much for your time over here, because there were a lot of these questions which were in a lot of organizations, CHRO, we are on the road, we meet so many of them day in and day out, and they keep coming back asking us some questions which we try to respond, but hearing it from you, they are confident that these are the responses and this is how they need to proceed. So thank you very much for taking your time out on this lovely evening. To audiences, thank you. Yes, Doctor, you were saying
No,
something.
I was just saying thank you. I hope you get more questions so that we can keep educating and keep making people better at doing what they're doing. Thank
Yeah.
you so much. Yeah.
Thank you very much, and thank you for audience for patiently listening in. And I hope in the form of Ashok, we have been able to identify all the questions which has been running in your mind and have been able to respond to it appropriately. I'm sure you've heard it from one of the most senior person in this industry who's been working in this area for really long time. For any of your questions, please raise it at info@kelphr.com. We are more than happy to guide you. And this is an important aspect for us. Anti-sexual harassment is something that Kelp HR is really promoting, and we really want all the organization across India to be compliant. Thank you very much. Signing off from Kelp HR.
Thank you.
Thank you.